Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel Code with Rajeswari. In today's video, I'll cover the most important interview questions and I'll explain the answers in simple language with real examples. This video will help you feel confident and ready for your iOS job interview in 2025. Let's get started. So the first question, explain the use of break statement in Swift language. It is used in a loop when you want to end a statement immediately in a loop. Also, it is used to end the case in the switch statement. In simple words, when program is running at a specified condition, we use a break statement that automatically breaks the current flow and terminates the program. And the second question will be, what is the difference between did set and will set in Swift? Didset is a property observer that is called after the property's value has been set, while willset is a property observer that is called before the property's value is set. Didset and willsets are useful for programming additional logic when a property's value changes, such as an updating the UI or triggering the methods. Next question will be, what is the NS user defaults? It is the simplest way to store data without a database using key value pairs. Basically, it provides a programmatic interface for interacting with the default systems. By these default settings, an application is able to change or modify its behavior to match a user's preference. For example, user can specify their preferred media playback speed. Next is NS user defaults support which type. This is like types of supported by NS user defaults are as follows, can be NS string, NS date, NS dictionary, NS data and NS number. Next question will be, what is the use of reuse identifier? It is used to accumulate together parallel rows in a table view. For example, rows that are different only in their content but otherwise have similar layouts. A UI table view object maintains a line of the currently reusable cell, each with its own reuse identifier, and makes them accessible to the delegate in the DQ reusable cell method. That's it. And the next question will be, tell one difference between viewDidLoad and viewDidAppear, where viewDidLoad pop-ups on the screen only when the view is loaded. At this position, you can initiate any instance variable and build any views that remain on the device of this view controller. And viewDidAppear each times on the device. In this position, you can perform any layout actions or you can do any drawing in the user interface. Next question is, which methods can you identify the layout of elements in UI view? So to answer this question, we can say interface builder. It gives collection of user interface objects to a soft developer. Next is NS layout constraints. NS layout constraints is the relationship between two user interface objects that must be satisfied by the constraint based layout system. Next is CGRect. CGRect is a structure that contains the location and dimensions of a rectangle. Next question will be, what is the significance of question mark in Swift? When declared question marks makes a property optional. However, if the property is not valuable, it helps avoid runtime errors. Next question will be, what do you know about synchronous and asynchronous tasks in iOS? These synchronous tasks are those for which you have to wait to complete before moving ahead. On the contrary, for asynchronous tasks, you don't have to wait for the task to complete. Synchronous code execution blocks the current thread until the task is completed, while asynchronous code execution allows the thread to continue running and completes the task in the background so that the UI thread in the main thread it won't get blocked. Next question is, what is deinitializer and how it is used in Swift? A deinitializer is called before a class instance is deallocated. To write it, we use dein keyword as follows. Next question is, explain lazy stored properties. These are the properties whose first values are not computed until the first time they are used. To use it, you can report the lazy modifier before its declaration. Next question is, what is the use of size classes? So size classes is a feature in iOS that allows developers to design adaptive interfaces that can adjust to different screen sizes and different device orientations. It is used to create user interfaces that look great and function well across different iOS devices. With size classes, developers can specify how the layout and behavior of their app's UI should change when it's displayed on a different device. So next question will be, explain one difference between atomic and non-atomic properties. Though we will not be using in Swift, the interviewer will ask this question. While atomic properties are slow but thread safe, only one thread is accessed by the variable. It is not a keyword but a default behavior, whereas non-atomic is a fast but thread unsafe and multiple thread accessed by the variable. It is not a default behavior, that's why we need to add the keyword in the property attribute. If two different threads access a similar variable at the same time, then maybe the result is unexpected behavior. Next is, list the different kinds of iOS application states. You can say not running state, active state, background state, suspended state and inactive state. Next is, list the ways to achieve concurrency in iOS. This is the most interviewer question that will ask by the interview. Next, these for to answer these questions, you can tell. So we have three types of concurrencies in iOS, which are threads, dispatch queues, and operation queues. Next is, what is the difference between try question mark, and try exclamation in Swift? To answer this question, try is used for throwing functions that can potentially fail. Try question mark is used to handle errors gracefully by returning nil if an error occurs. And try exclamation is used to force and wrap the result of a throwing function and crash the app if any error occurs. Try is typically used for non-critical operations where it's okay to gracefully handle errors, while try should be used and only when you are certain that an error won't occur. Next question is, explain auto release pool in Swift. The primary purpose of auto release pool is to help manage memory usage and reduce memory footprint in programs that create a lot of short lived objects. An auto release pool is a stack like structure that manages the releases of objects. When an object is added on auto release pool, it is not released immediately but rather added to a list of objects that will be released when a pool is drained. Next question is, what is the difference between app ID from bundle ID and why they are used? To answer this question, you can say app ID is a unique identifier used by Apple to identify a specific app developed by a specific development team. It is used for various purposes such as enabling push notifications, setting up app groups, and configuring the App Store. Bundle ID, on the other hand, is an identifier specified by the developer in Xcode that uniquely identifies each application. It is used to identify the app's executable as well as its resources and metadata. Next is, tell me one difference between Cocoa and Cocoa Touch. Cocoa is an application framework for building applications for macOS, where Cocoa Touch is used for building applications that run on iPad and iPhones. Next question is, explain automatic reference counting, which is ARC. ARC is a memory management technique used in iOS development to automatically manage the memory of objects. It initializes and reinitializes the system resources. It is a memory management option for Objective-C provided by the client computer. It automatically frees up memory when class instances don't have a strong references. And the next question is, what do you know about Grand Central Dispatch in iOS, which is GCD? To answer this question, you can say GCD is a low level API that allows running tasks in parallel. Also, it manages threads in the background. It contains language features, system enhancements, and runtime libraries that provide comprehensive and systematic improvements on multi core hardware in iOS. Next question is, what is deep linking in Swift iOS? It directs the user to an app instead of a website through URLs or universal links. Deep links to a specific piece of content within an app. The content could be a particular section of a page, a view, or a certain lab. For example, you might be seeing a people can share a link via messages. If you click on that link, it directly navigates to the app store where you can download the application. This is what the deep linking in iOS. Next is, what is Objective-C in OS? So Apple uses Objective-C as an object-oriented programming language. This language entails the benefits of C and Smalltalk. Objective-C inherits C syntax, flow, control systems, and primitive types, and adds syntax for defining methods and classes. So this is an old programming language we were using to implement an iOS applications. Since Swift and SwiftUI came, so many developers were shifted to these languages. Next question is, list the important data types in Objective-C. You can say Boolean, NS integer, NS UI integer, and NS string. Next is, what is the use of notification center? Notification Center is a feature in iOS and macOS which is mostly used to receive system messages outside and inside of your application. It shows your notifications history, allowing you to scroll back and see what you have missed. Users may choose what applications appear in Notification Center and how they handle. Next is, what is a dictionary in Swift? Dictionary in Swift is an unordered collection of items that stores items in key value pairs. It uses a key as an identifier to store the values that can be recovered through the same key. It is an unordered collection of key value pairs. A key refers to a unique identifier and a key stores a value. Next is, what are design patterns in iOS? It means it solves specific problems that might occur while designing an app's architecture. They are templates designed to make your coding easier. The most common design patterns are facade, decorator, memento, and adapter. Next is, what is completion handler? They are functions passes as parameters to other functions. Also, they are used with asynchronous tasks. They tell when an operation has finished. It is a technique for implementing callback functionality using blocks and closures. Next is, what are IBCons in iOS? It is a new low energy Bluetooth wireless technology that allows iPhone and other iOS users to get location based info on smartphones. It is a small scale network device that acts as a transmitter to detect and track smartphones. Next question is, what is test driven development? It is used during software development to decide the software characteristics and write test cases for each such characteristics. It provides insights into both quality and design. You have to create and test each functionality of the test case. If it is fails, write the new code to pass the test and make the code simple and bug free. So next question is, what is the difference between a closure and functions in Swift? So here a closure is a self-contained blocks of code that can be passed around and executed at later time, while a function is named block of code that performs a specific task. Next question, How do you implement a singleton in Swift? Provide an example. To implement a singleton in Swift, you need to create a static instance property and a private initializer. So I am going to create an example here. So this is how you will be creating a singleton class. Next is, what is the difference between a weak reference and a strong reference in iOS development? A strong reference keeps an object in memory until it is released, while a weak reference allows the object to be deallocated when there are no more strong references to it. For example, in the following code, the parent object has a strong reference to the child object, while the child object has a weak reference to its parent. This is how we will be using it. Next is explain code coverage. To answer this question, it measures the statements in the body of code that have been executed and non-executed when tests are performed. A program with high test coverage executes more of its source code during testing, suggesting it has a lower chance of containing undetected software bugs than a programming with low test coverage. Next is, how do you use a guard statement in Swift? A guard statement is used to exit a function or method early if a certain condition is not met. It is typically used to validate input parameters at the beginning of a function. So here is an example. So I am going to create a divide function and getting to print the result here. What is the use of a design patterns in Linux? They are used to solve common problems in software design and assist in writing simplified code using different templates. Using design patterns, you can represent an idea, not a particular implementation, and make code more flexible, reusable, and maintainable. Next question is, talk about core data. Core data is used as a framework for managing object graphs. It helps manage a graph object instances that is potentially very large. This allows the app to use a graph that would not completely fit in the memory by bringing objects in and out of the memory when needed. Core data also helps in managing the limitations on properties and relationships and in maintaining the integrity of references. This means that when objects are added to or removed from a relationship, the toward and backward links remain consistent. Therefore, core data is considered to be the perfect framework for creating the model of an MVC architecture. Core data uses SQLite for disk storage to implement graph management. It is possible to implement graph management using some other relational database or even a non-relational database like CouchDB. Core data is more of an API that abstract from the actual data store than a database engine. Therefore, you can tell how core data must store itself as a plist and SQLite database, a binary file or a custom data store type. Giving a detailed answer in an iOS interview questions like this is good, but you can answer can become great if you could add your perspective as to the answer. And the next question is, what is the difference between copy and retain? Generally, retaining an object increases its retain count by 1. This helps retain the object in memory instead of being blown away. Therefore, if you have only the retained version of an object, you will share that copy of the same with whoever sent it to you. Copying an object, on the other hand, creates an extra copy or a duplicate version of the object, while you share the original with the person who sent to you. You don't share the copied or duplicate version with the sender. Next is, talk about code signing for iOS application. A signed application helps the system to know who signed the application, also to determine that no changes were made to the application after it was signed. This is a necessary step to submit the application to the App Store for iOS and Mac. There is a signature verification process in OS X and iOS to confirm that the applications do not run with invalid signatures. This builds trust for the users who know that the application is signed by a verified Apple source and no changes were made to it since signing. During the build process, you digitally identify it is used by Xcode to sign your application. The digital identify comprises a public private key pair and a certificate. The cryptographic functions use the private key to create the signature, and Apple issues the certificate that contains the public key and helps identify you as the key pair owner. Next question is, what are the differences in iOS app state? There are 5 app states in iOS. While the app state is managed by the OS, the important tasks are managed by app itself, so that the transition between states happens smoothly. The iOS programming guides list the 5 iOS app states as follows. One is not running, when the app is not running in the state. Next is inactive, when the app runs in the foreground but does not receive any events. This can happen with an iOS app when a call or SMS is received or some other function takes. Next is active state. This is the state when the apps runs in the foreground and receive events. Next is background, when the app runs in the background and executes code at the same time. Next is suspended, when the app is running in the background but does not execute any code at the time. These are the 5 states we will be using in iOS. Next, mention the main features of iOS Swift, also outlines its advantages and disadvantages. The main features of iOS Swift as follows: generics, optionals, reference types, value types, static typing, and protocols. When creating a client application requirement, more strict clarity than flexibility and dynamism. When you don't want inexperienced developers to have expensive power and cause damage to themselves or their work and thus need to and restrictions. When your code needs refactoring and using the compiler can help in writing proper and correct code. Next is, what is MVC? MVC stands for Model View Controller. It is Apple's main software design pattern for developing iOS apps. Models represent the data for the application, view brings things to the screen, and controllers are used to manage the flow of data between model and view. There is no direct communication between model and view. All communications is taken care by the controller. As a senior developer or a fresher, one must know that while MVC is good for general purpose design, it can be used only for the view layer. Therefore, using only MVC will restrict the architecture of the application and could also lead to the massive view controller problem. Massive view controller refers to the state of code base when excessive logic and responsibility are given to the view controllers that are not supposed to shoulder that responsibility. As a result, the code may become rigid, bloated, and difficult to alter. As a remedy, one use can design patterns such as coordinator, MVP, and MVVM for scaling iOS code and avoiding this type of problem. Architectures like Viper and some other architectures also can be used. Next is, can you difference between the delegate and KVO? Both delegate and KVO create relationship between objects. Delegation creates a one-to-one relationship in which the delegate protocols is implemented by one object and the other object uses protocol defined methods to send messages to the first object. KVO on the other hand creates a many-to-many relationship in which the message is broadcast by one object and one or more objects receive the message and react to it. KVO is not protocol dependent. Next is, so mention different options for implementing storage and persistence in iOS. So we can tell it like for intermediate data storage, if for storage that doesn't need a last line, we can use in-memory arrays, dictionaries, sets, and other data structures. For simple key value storage, we can use NS user defaults keychain. Here, one thing is insecure and the other issue is secure respectively. For writing data or from a disk, we can take the help from NS file manager whether the data is serialized or not. We can use file or disk storage. When trying to simplify working with databases, frameworks like Core Data and Realm can be useful. So, next question will be, what programming language is used for iOS development? The primary programming language used for iOS development is Swift. Objective-C is also used, but its usage has been declining in favor of Swift. And SwiftUI also you can use it. Next question is, list some important features of Swift. Some of the important features of Swift includes safety, simplicity in syntax and readability, and supports for multi-platform. Next question is, tell one difference between an array and a set. Where arrays are an ordered collection of values, sets are an unordered collection. Also, an array can duplicate elements while a set cannot. Next is, explain tuples and their use in Swift. A tuple is a set of multiple values inside Swift. They occupy space between dictionaries and structures and return values from a function call. Next question is, what is the use of geometry reader? Geometry reads all the size and position information and passes that information to its child views via geometry proxy. It is a flexible view and takes over all the available space provided by the parent view. Next question is, explain the bounding box. A bounding box is a rectangular frame that represents the smallest rectangle that completely encloses a particular object or shape. These objects can be an image, a text character, or any other graphical element on the screen. The bounding box is defined by its position and size. The position is specified by the coordinates of the left top corner of the rectangle, with size is specified by the width and height of the rectangle. Next is, what purpose does IB-designable serve? When a connect to IB-designable, it allows Xcode to preview it while storyboards are edited. Interface Builder helps directly with making custom layouts. You can easily provide any effective like border width, shadow color, shadow width, border color, corner radius, and shadow capacity. Next is, can you tell the type of settings that are stored in your info.plist file? Question answer is, it stores those settings that must be available even when the app is not running. It is a file in the Mac and GNU step environments that stores users' settings. They are three formats: plist, text binary, and XML. A plist can store string, number, data, boolean, dictionary, and an array. Next, explain drawstrings in Swift. They create strings that print what you see, unlike someone escape orders that make your string print a different form. Raw strings are denoted by the hash symbol, also known as a pound symbol. It is used before and after quotation marks by using hash at the starting and the end point. Next is, tell me about circular references in Swift. To answer this question, when two objects strongly refer each other, they can never be deallocated, and these strong references also enables them to keep each other alive. When objects hold strong references to each other, it means that each object has a strong ownership of the other, which creates a cycle, and this cycle is referred to as circular references. Next question is, can we add a stored property type through extension? To answer this question is no. We cannot add a stored property at a type through an extension. So, extensions in Swift can add computed properties, instance methods, class methods, and initializers to a type, but they cannot add stored properties. This is because stored properties must be initialized when an instance of the type is created, and extensions cannot provide their own initializers. Next is, what do you understand about half open? Now let's move to the SwiftUI interview questions. How does SwiftUI differ from UIKit in terms of UI design and structure? To answer this question, SwiftUI is declarative, focusing on what the UI should look like rather than how to build it step by step. As in UIKit's imperative approach, SwiftUI is designed to manage state changes, updating the views automatically when data changes. Next is, can you explain the pros and cons of SwiftUI compared to UIKit? The pros are SwiftUI development with declarative syntax, reactive to state changes, and integrated with Apple's new frameworks. The cons are limited backward compatibility, not as mature as UIKit, and some performance limitations in complex interfaces. Next is, what is a declarative UI and how does SwiftUI implement this concept? Declarative UI focuses on declaring the UI's end state based on data, with SwiftUI managing updates automatically. SwiftUI uses @state and other property wrappers to handle UI changes. Next is, how does declarative UI differ from imperative UI and why it is useful in SwiftUI? Since SwiftUI is declarative, UI allows describing the UI appearance while imperative UI defines step-by-step instructions to reach a UI state. This reduces bipolarity and enhances reliability. Next is SwiftUI view hierarchy and functions. What are view builder and main actor in SwiftUI? View builder allows building multiple views in a single closure where main actor ensures code is run on the main thread, especially useful for UI updates. Next is, explain the purpose of the view protocol and how it works in SwiftUI. The view protocol is the base for all views in SwiftUI, representing a piece of the UI. Views are value types and SwiftUI relies on different to update only changed views. Next is, what is state binding and observable object in SwiftUI? State is nothing but local state for simple values. Next, binding, which passes a state reference to child views. Next, observable object manages complex state in external object. Next question is, how do the property wrappers enable state management in SwiftUI? They follow for reactive updates in the UI by tracking data changes, with SwiftUI automatically re-rendering views when state changes. What is environment object and when should we use it? Environment object is for global state. Passing shared data across multiple views, it's useful for app-wide shared object. Next question will be, what is the difference between stateful and stateless views in SwiftUI? Stateful views stores and manages data, while stateless views rely on data passed from parent views. How does SwiftUI handle view updates with state and observed object? SwiftUI automatically re-renders views when state or observed object properties change. What triggers view updates in SwiftUI? So it changes in state, binding or observable object properties trigger updates. So how does the state property trigger view refreshes? SwiftUI re-renders any view containing a modified state property. Next would be side effects in SwiftUI. So what are side effects in SwiftUI and how can they be managed? To answer this question, side effects are actions triggered by state changes managed through onAppear, onDisappear and environment object. Next is, explain the use of onAppear and onDisappear modifiers. OnAppear and disappear are called when views enters or leaves the screen, handling tasks like data loading or cleanup. Next important question will be, what is mean by published and state object? What is the difference between these? So state object is used for an object's initial declaration, while observed object is for passing existing instances. When do we use published object in SwiftUI? So published marks properties for observation in observable object, triggering view updates and changes. So how do we handle asynchronous operations in SwiftUI? This would be the next question. So we can use task, async await or combine publishers like onAppear for launching async work. Next, how do we integrate combine publishers or async await in SwiftUI? So we have a on receive allows listening to publisher, task launches async code directly. Next is how can SwiftUI observe and respond to combined publishers? So by subscribing with onReceive or binding publisher to state properties. So next question will be explain how SwiftUI can work with observed object for state management. We have observable object classes manage state across views using observed object and environment object. So next will be how do you convert non-SwiftUI properties like external data into SwiftUI state. So we can tell them like wrap the data in state or observable object for SwiftUI reactively. Next is what is derived state and how does it improve performance? Derived state is inferred state computed from other state properties to reduce the memory size. How does SwiftUI optimize views with state and observable object? SwiftUI re-renders only the views affected by changes in observed properties. Next will be memory management. Explain the role of binding in SwiftUI. We can say binding enables shared state across views without ownership. What is the purpose of environment in SwiftUI? So it provides read-only values like device settings and accessible to views. So how does the life cycle of the UI views in SwiftUI? So the question will be describe the life cycle of a SwiftUI view. So views initialize appear which is on appear, update with state changes and disappear which is on disappear. How does SwiftUI handles view updates and state changes? So to answer this question, SwiftUI's defined algorithm applies update based on state changes. What are some best practices to optimize performance in SwiftUI? We can say at the rate view builder to minimize view complexity and avoid unnecessary bindings. Next is how does view builder contribute to performance? We can say it enables multiple views in closures, reducing redundant operations. So the next question is, can we use UIKit views within SwiftUI and then how? Yes, we can use UIKit in SwiftUI as well, but we have to add UI view representable to wrap UIKit views. Next question is, how do you integrate SwiftUI and UIKit in the same application? We can say which embedded SwiftUI views in UIKit with UI hosting controller or UIKit views in SwiftUI with UI view representable protocol. So what is state hosting and how does it work in SwiftUI? We can say state hosting moves state to a parent view for shared access using binding to pass it down. Next is how do you environment and environment object work in SwiftUI? They provide global state across views with environment object for observable project. Next question is how does SwiftUI handle global state across multiple views? By using environment object accessible to all views sharing the object. Next question is explain the comparison phases in SwiftUI. We can say SwiftUI evaluates, differ and re-renders views in phases to optimize updates. Next is the role of modifiers. How do view modifier works in SwiftUI and how can they be used effectively? Modifiers configure views by changing, affecting appearance, interaction and layout. Next is how do you manage accessibility for SwiftUI views? We can say using modifiers like accessibility label to make content accessible to screen readers. Next is how do you handle user input and gestures in SwiftUI. We can say SwiftUI offers gestures like dot untap gesture for touch interactions, and explain how SwiftUI manages taps, drags and other gestures. Gesture modifiers allow handling and chaining complex gestures on views. Next question will be on navigation links and navigation views. How do you handle navigation in SwiftUI? We can say use navigation view with navigation link for stack based navigation. Next, how do you programmatically navigate between views in SwiftUI? We can use bind navigation link to a boolean or a selection to control navigation programmatically. Next question is, how does SwiftUI handle orientation changes? We can say we can use geometry reader or environment to adapt layouts. What is environment? Environment objects role in managing orientations. So we can say at the environment. Next is the difference between completion handlers versus task. Completion handlers are nothing but when the task is completed, then we'll get a notification. But task is something like if you wanted to perform any network conditions or something like that. So we can say we'll be using this in that places. Next question is, does SwiftUI modifiers order affects the results? Yes, absolutely. The order of applying SwiftUI view modifiers does affect the final outcome of the view. Each modifier modifies the view and passes that modified view to the next modifier in the chain, effectively creating a sort of layering effect. In this scenario, the text view is first modified by applying a frame with a width of 100 points and then 20 points, which will be added into the bounds. So the sequence of applying modifiers is crucial. It can significantly impact the appearance and the layout of the view. Next question would be, explain Geometry Reader in SwiftUI. Geometry Reader is a container view in SwiftUI that provides information about the geometry of its parent view and allows for flexible layouts based on the geometry. It's particularly useful when you need to create views whose sizes or positions depend on the available space or the size of the device's screen. How do you identify performance issue in SwiftUI app? This is the majority people will ask this question. So identifying performance issues in SwiftUI apps can be crucial for delivering a smooth and responsive user experience. You can use various tools and techniques including instruments or to analyze and optimize performances. Here is an overview of steps and tools we can use. We can use time profiler, which is helps to CPU performance issues by recording and analyzing function level tasks, and core animations. We can use GPU issues and animations, and leaks identifies memory leaks or excessive memory usages. These are the ways we can find it out. So what is associated type and how does SwiftUI use it? In SwiftUI development, you might encounter scenarios where you need to work with associated type in various contexts, particularly when creating custom views, modifiers or components that leverage SwiftUI protocols. In SwiftUI, the view protocol uses an associated type called body. This associated type allows SwiftUI views to define the type of content they will be display as their body. So this is how we will be using a body. In this example, the view protocol is used and the body property is implemented to return a text view. However, internally the view protocol has a associated type named body, which is used to represent the type of content the view will display. Next is how to debug a SwiftUI view. So we have many things like using SwiftUI previews we can do it, and using print statements and debugging logs. The next is inspecting view hierarchy and attributes. Another one will be conditional compilation with hash if debug, and we can put breakpoints and LLDB, and we have error handling and propagation. So these are the ways where we can debug it.